Hello everyone, and today we're going to look at the Scotch Gambit. And today we're having the main move e5. We're getting there by moves e4, e5. White is bringing the pawn in the center. We are doing it as well, classical approach. White is attacking the pawn on e5 and also controlling the d4 square potentially. Knight jumping to c6, we're defending the pawn and also controlling the d4 square, and immediately strike in the center is happening by white. d4 is played, we're taking the pawn, and here, since it's a gambit, white is not taking the pawn but playing bishop c4. We go for knight f6, and here the common move is e5, immediately attacking the knight on f6. And here we're going for d5, immediately striking. As we already learned, if we can reply to the move e5 with a d5, then it's great. We're bringing a lot of power. The problem for white is not really it's not possible to take on d6. It would just simplify the position for black. Meanwhile, we are targeting the bishop. Of course, white could try to take on f6, but then we would take bishop on c4. So let's see which are opportunities here for white. So first of all, taking the knight is an opportunity. Pawn takes on f5. We take the bishop, as we already said. In case of queen e2, we can just play bishop e6, defending from everything, and we have super strong pawns. And we're having just an extra pawn for not much. So in case of castle, we just take the pawn on f6, at rook e1 again, bishop e6, and we're just fine. And we are actually having two extra pawns, which are pretty strong. In case pawn takes on d6, then we're just recapturing with the bishop, developing the piece at the same time. In case of knight d4, it would not really work out due to the tactical trick, since after knight d4, queen d4, there is an issue with the queen, and it's a double attack and a check at the same time. So if bishop goes back to b3, which is passive and normally is not played, we jump immediately with the knight to e4. In case of castle, we have bishop g4, and it's not going to be so easy to take the pawn on d4. In case of knight d4, we're going for bishop c5, immediately targeting the knight on d4. In case of bishop e3, trying to defend, we're just trading, and we have nice move, queen g5, targeting the square on g2. After castle, we have bishop a3 with the threat of checkmate, and in case white is playing something like g3, then the rook is going to hang on f1. We will be up in exchange. So what happens if c3? C3 supporting the knight looks very logical. Then we take on e5, castle, and we have a great position. And meanwhile, we're still up a pawn, so we have a clear advantage. In case of bishop d3 here, it's also another move. It's possible, but it's too passive. White cannot play like this in the gambit. Then we play knight e4. We go forward. In case of castle, bishop g4, again, trying to hold to a pawn for some time, while e5 is actually pretty weak. And if knight bd2, then we have knight g5 jump, very nice jump, offering the trade of the knights. And the idea is that after knight g5, queen g5, again, we are creating issues for white on the king side. Castle, bishop h3, and here queen f3, the only move which is defending the pawn without losing the material. But after bishop e6, knight b3, queen g4, we're getting very comfortable position. Meanwhile, we're still up the pawn, and e5 is going to be a weak pawn. So that were like the side moves, and now we're coming to the main line, which is bishop b5. It is pretty much the only move, because this move is active. The bishop is pinning the knight to a king, so some knight d4 threats are coming into the picture. So many ideas, of course, connected with this move. And here main move is actually knight to e4, jumping the knight to e4. It's a main move, main line. In our repertoire, we are opting out for knight d7. It is an alternative to the main line. It is not the most popular move, but it has its ideas. And of course, one of the ideas definitely that we're breaking the pin. We are ready to grab on e5 at some moment, and we are attacking the pawn on e5. Well, at the same time, it's not so easy to react to this move for white, and white can be tempted to play something like e6, which wouldn't really work out. We're going to find out it a little bit later. So yeah, obviously knight on e4 in comparison to knight to d7 looks more active, but it could be also always kicked with a pawn from f3, from f2, like with moves like f3 and then f4 defending the pawn. So it's not so clear which square is actually better, even though it feels like d7 is definitely like more passive square, but there are many pros to it. Well, we're putting pressure on e5 pawn, as we already mentioned, and we're breaking the pin. And many times, knight is going to go very interestingly via b8. We're going to look at that. Knight is going to remaneuver very nicely, and we're going to get really good positions. So let's start from here. There are quite a few moves which can be played by white. I actually had 2 games over the board in Scotch Gambit with e5 after this position, and maybe I'll show one of the moves as well, which was played. So we're going to start with the first move, knight takes on d4. It's generally it's an idea, of course, to take with a knight on d4. Okay, let's first of all point out. Let me just remove this all these moves. So let's point out that taking on d4 and taking on c6 and let's say castling. These are like the moves which are considered right now by white, because okay, castling is rather a very calm move. And also of course e6. So we have these moves and bishop f4. Let's say this is the like developing and defending move at the same time. But I would say out of these 5 moves, 3 moves are kind of most forcing or most tempting, is like take, and push with e6. So we're going to start with knight takes d4. So first of all, definitely yes, white is taking the pawn on d4. And it is a little bit too early actually to take there, because now we can take with a knight. In case bishop takes d7, we have bishop takes, queen takes d4, bishop f5. And basically what we can say about this position, that we won a bishop pair. While e5 pawn could be a weakness potentially, because it's a little bit too far promoted. And we have a perfect pawn structure. Queen takes d4 is also possible, but then we have c6 immediately challenging the bishop. Bishop has to move. If it goes to d3, then we play bishop c5. On queen g4, we have g6. We're just protecting from all the threats. And the problem is going to be with the e5 pawn here. If queen goes to f4, then we have queen e7, and we are almost winning because there is no way to defend the pawn on e5. So bishop goes back to e2. Let's look at this line. Then we are having bishop c5 developing with a tempo, immediately targeting the queen. Queen g4, targeting our g7 square. Logically, we're just defending. Queen g3, bishop d4, f4, trying to defend and putting the other pawn on the dark square. And after f6, we're just breaking the pawn chain here, and there are going to be some problems for white because the king is going to stay in the center for some time. Since our bishop is just cutting it pretty nicely, the position is clearly better for black. That was knight d4. Let's see what happens after bishop f4. Well, it's like developing move, which might make some sense because it's also defending the pawn on e5 potentially. Bishop c5, castle, knight bd2, just normal developing moves we're going for. And I also would like to highlight this bishop c5 move because we're just defending the pawn on d4. We're not giving back the pawn so easily. f6 immediately challenging the center, the pawn on e6, on e5, ef6, and then our knight is coming back to f6 on a very good square. Knight b3, white wants to take back the pawn. Of course, we cannot really do much. So knight takes, and we have c5, we're striking immediately. And we're gaining some squares in the center. So after knight e2, we have c4, and now there is going to be an issue already with the bishop on the queen side. We might try to trap it. Well, and okay, we have a wonderful square on e4. Our bishop is also a brilliant piece, and comparing bishop pair, black's bishop pair to white's bishop pair is definitely clear which bishop pair is better. Also, not forgetting about potential ideas with the dark squared bishop and the open or semi-open f-file. Now we're going to check the move bishop takes c6. So this move basically immediately saying I want to win the pawn back and I want to double the pawns. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and now, okay, the main move obviously is taking on d4 with the knight, but let's say what happens if the queen takes on d4. Queen takes, we have bishop e7, just developing move. Actually, in this position, bishop c5 is definitely possible. You can go for it. But basically, after bishop e7, we're just going to transpose after castle, castle. Now we're going to transpose the seventh move of castle, then bishop e7, and then bishop c6. So we're going to transpose the same position from the move order starting from castle. So in case castle happens immediately, then we're just playing c5. We're in time to defend the pawn. And after c3, d takes c3. If knight takes c3, then we have c6 and we defended everything. We have a perfect pawn structure. And after queen d5, attacking our rook on a8. Then we have cb, bishop b2, and now knight b6, attacking the queen and defending the rook on a8. Perfect move. So now, question for white, do they want to trade or not? In case they trade, we're just going into endgame, where we have double pawn on the c-file, getting some kind of a Berlin endgame, but there is no actually queen side for white. So we are up a pawn, but okay, we have doubled pawns and we have bishop pair. So there are a lot of pros, which makes this position clearly better for black. So in case queen goes away, not trading, queen e4, then we have just queen d5. We're challenging the queen again, offering a trade. Obviously, we have a nice bishop pair. We're still up a pawn. Let's not forget about that. And well, we're just going to have good chances in this endgame. In case knight takes on d4, which looks the most natural, then we capture it with a knight on e5. Actually, I had this position in one of my games. Yes, exactly, I had this position. So, okay, so bishop f4. We play queen f6. We're defending everything. Bishop g3. We're also defending and attacking at the same time. Bishop has to go back, and then we have bishop a6. We're blocking the castling opportunity for white. Meanwhile, we can actually castle. We can play bishop e7 and castle short. Or also bishop d6 is also possible. Both bishop d6 and bishop e7. Depends. So queen e2, very tempting actually, because you would like to put the queen on the same file with a king. Looks very logical. Here we must play queen e7. It's the only move. Otherwise the f4 would come and our knight would be gone. So if castle happens, then we go for c5, targeting the knight. Knight goes away. Bishop g4 with a tempo. By the way, very important. If f3 is happening, we have knight f3, and well, there is going to be an issue with the queen. So queen has to move, queen d2. And now we have queen d6. We are ready to long castle, and we have very pretty comfortable position with an extra pawn. f4, targeting our knight immediately. Then we go for knight g4. And while knight is moving away, we stop protecting the pawn on c6. So after knight c6, attacking our queen, there is no other way than trading the queens. Of course, in this position, we can say, yes, white managed to win back the pawn, but let's look at our bishops and the king's position. So now we go for bishop d7, targeting the knight, knight e5, we trade, long castle. Well, and we can see that how active our pieces are. and how, I mean, the problem on e5 is definitely always going to be there, and there are still pieces standing on the queen side, which is going to be one of the issues for white, and we have also a bishop there. So in case of castle immediately, it actually happened in my game. And here I didn't play, I think I didn't, no, actually I played this move, wow. Okay, yes, bishop d6 was played, and I played this also in my game. So first of all, we're developing, at the same time defending the knight on e5, we're ready to castle. So that's why first white has to castle, and then take the knight on c6 if they want to try something. With this move order, we are in time to put the bishop on d6, even better square than e7. So f4, attacking the knight, then knight goes to g4. That's actually what happened in my game. And in case of h3, did this actually happen in my game? Yeah, I think something like this. Knight f6 was played. I think I played in my game h5, and I managed to win the game later. I'm not sure if I'm talking about the completely same position or it was something different. But yeah, something like this happened. So let's look again at h3, knight f6, where we can just also move the knight back. I'm not sure if exactly here h5 works or it was just similar position. So knight takes c6, bishop c5, king h2, queen d6. Yeah, and we're just having much better position. We have bishop here. We have pressure against the king. King is much weaker also after, especially after this f4 move was played. So we have much better position here. So if knight takes c6 here, then we have queen h4, and we are just attacking the king. Many weak squares. Also here, let's not forget, we have bishop a6, bishop c5. And in case we are getting checked, we shouldn't worry. We can just move with the king away to f8. So rook e1, king f8. Yeah, I think something like this happened in my game. I got checked on e1 and played king h8. And if h3, yeah, maybe here I played... so maybe I had c5 first here. So here I think I replied with h5. So c5, knight goes away, then we move away with our knight. If white is taking on g4, then we take the knight as well. White is winning back the pawn, but we are having super active bishops. There are problems with development for white. Our rook can cover the 6th rank, so we shouldn't worry about like castling or something like this. Our rook is coming from the 6th rank and is going to work there brilliantly. And again, many threats are there in the position for white. Knight jumps all the way to b5, targeting our bishop. We cannot do really much because bishop is under attack. I mean, there is no sense to move it away. We go back with the knight since it was attacked. And after c4, d4, b4, white is trying to break all our pawn chains. But then we just don't react because we don't want to give white the d4 pawn. So bishop b7, very logically, we just develop the bishop on the stone long diagonal. Knight d6, queen d6, and after pawn takes, very important intermezzo, targeting the pawn on g2 with a checkmate threat. Queen f3 is the only move, but then we take, and we take back the pawn. So basically, now we have equal material, right? No, we're actually up a pawn. Wait a second. Are we up a pawn? Yeah, we were actually up a pawn. Meanwhile, these pawns are weak. Okay, our pawn on d4 is also isolated, so it can be also taking sometimes later. We have to be careful about introducing our rook into the play. Maybe we have to trade the a rook first, bringing it to e8, and then bringing the king somewhere to d7, and then bring back the rook. Alternatively, our rook can go weird 6th rank, as earlier mentioned. We can always use a streak of playing h5 or h5, h4, and then rook can also work on the 5th rank. Because here we have to be very careful about this bishop from c1. But position is definitely at least slightly better for black. So knight c6, attacking the queen. Now we go with the queen to the h4. That was kind of a test because knight c6 was attacking the queen while our knight was also under attack. So what happens if white is taking the piece? Then we are just grabbing the pawn with the bishop. Queen d2 defending the rook. It's very important. But after bishop f4, the harmony is starting already to be destroyed. Queen f2, bishop g3, very logical. Queen c5 check. We go back with the bishop, goes back, but we are not repeating. Queen h2, king f1, bishop d7. And now we are entering from the other side. We sacrifice the material, we sacrifice the piece, but other pieces are still standing in the position. So knight d4, bishop g3 again, knight f3, attacking our queen. We have to do something, but we have a check, intermezzo, bishop b5, rook e2, the only way to defend from check. Bishop takes, king takes, and here we have rook e8. Basically, we have 3 pieces against king, and there's 2 pieces which are trying to defend the king. It's a clearly better position for black. Still, a lot of defense has to be made by white to survive, because these pieces are just not participating in anything, in any defense. So it's pretty difficult position for white, practically, especially. So we looked at bishop c6. And now, before we go to the main move castle, I want to show you also briefly the move which happened to me actually shortly before recording this this chapter. It's pretty funny actually that I got this position in the game in one of the league in Germany. It's Oberliga, and my opponent played e6 here, and he played it pretty fast. I just want to show you a few moves because it's actually a very bad move. We're going to see some e6 ideas later also, but he played e6 exactly at this moment. So I took some time, definitely, because I was not sure what is this, but I knew that shouldn't be good. So he took on c6, I took on c6, knight d4, attacking both pawns. Okay, we're not holding to material. Here I could have played maybe knight b8, similar to how we would react on this type of moves, but since I had an opportunity to bring the queen out, I decided to go for queen f6. Taking on c6 would be too risky because my pieces are getting into the game. I'm castling. There's going to be a big problem on f2. So my opponent castled instead, and I played e5. Well, we got into something like some position like this. I played a5 here, threatening bishop a6, rook e1 was played. Bishop g7. I'm going to show you a few maybe moves. Bishop g5 was played. This was a very nice trick, so there is always this knight e6 idea, so I have to play queen d6. Of course, I saw it before. And after queen f3, I played knight f6, ready to castle. So basically, after all this pawn sacrifice, which tried to hold my development, I find a way how I can finish the development, and here my opponent sacrificed the piece. Which I could have taken. I decided to castle, which was also winning. I ended up losing this game, unfortunately, because I blundered in time trouble to... I blundered to an equality first, and then I blundered a couple of moves before move 40 to a loss. It was pretty painful. I'm talking about it because it just happened just very recently before this recording, so that's why I still hold this pain from the game. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of the game. And okay, the problem is that knight is not so easy to defend. So I would have this position is already pretty much winning. But taking also the knight would be easy way. If white is not doing this, they're in huge trouble due to all the pieces in activity and our strong center. So yeah, this is also definitely not good, but something which could be tempting. You just shouldn't worry. It's nothing which is working out for white. So now we're going to go to the main move, which is castle. So here the problem is that we cannot capture on e5, and we cannot really do much. Like if white would already take on c6, take on d4, then we could take on e5. Let's say we can already do something, put the bishop on d6. But now, since castle happened, now we cannot really grab a pawn, and we cannot really develop the bishop too active. So what should we do? We develop the bishop to the e7, where we can. Of course, it's not an ideal square. We would love to have it maybe on d6 or something, but okay, we cannot physically. So we have to do this. We develop bishop on e7. It's a good move. We're just developing, and we're getting ready to castle. So here there are, again, quite a few moves. So knight d4, let's start with this. If knight d4 happens, then here we can already take on e5. So knight c e5. After f4, go with a knight to g6. If f5, we go with a knight back. So yeah, it doesn't make so much sense, but yeah, knight went back to e5, but the pawn could be a bit annoying on f5. After bishop d7, bishop f4, we have knight c4, attacking the pawn on b2. Our knight is jumping all the way around, but it's going to go, in case it's going to be chased, it can go to the d6, also to e4, e4 later, targeting the pawn on f5. Position is clearly better for black. We are, by the way, still up a pawn and with a bishop pair, ready to finish the development by castling. In case of bishop f4 here, which would defend the pawn, we're castling. Definitely we want to change, we want to finish the development. Bishop c6, bc, knight d4, and this move is going to be played a lot. So you have to memorize that going back with a knight can be also a very nice move. So we're going back, we're defending the pawn on c6, we're ready to go forward with the c5 move, and we also control e6 squares. Also, yes, very important that the bishop is controlling f5 square, because f5, f4, f5 is an idea from white. e6, yeah, similar move like the move before, but a bit different. So now we have a bishop on e7. So yeah, basically doesn't really change much. We take a pawn because there is not much there, no threats actually. Bishop takes e6, bc, and knight d4, attacking two pawns, introducing idea of queen d4, queen h5, sorry. And here we go the same. We go with knight back to b8, defending the pawn on c6, at the same time defending the pawn on e6. And we are ready to, at some moment, to push either e5 or c5. We're going to see, it's going to depend. So rook e1, targeting the pawn on e6. Well, and the problem is that we cannot really, looking at our development, we can see that many pieces are on the last rank. So we cannot really afford to hold on to this pawn. So we have to do something. If we hold on to the pawn, play something like queen d6, then there is queen h5, g6, queen h6. And well, white is getting activity and big compensation for a pawn. We don't need that. We rather develop, we rather castle. That's why we castle here. We castle. We don't care about that pawn. Knight e6, bishop takes, rook takes, and bishop c5. And now we are the ones who are having better development, because we have only one knight to get developed, even though knight was actually perfect on b8, defending everything. So in case rook bishop e3, we play d4, attacking the bishop, bishop d2, and queen d5, attacking the rook. Our knight is ready to jump in. We have some d3 ideas later, so we have great position here. In case rook comes back to e2, trying to defend from the e2 square, then we have queen f6, not only targeting on f2 and introducing a threat of bishop takes, but also we're controlling, we are controlling the b2 square, so that the bishop cannot really develop. So queen g4 is also very logical, attacking both e6 and g7 square. So we castle. And now, after knight e6, I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So even though knight takes on e6, attacking the rook and the queen, so it's a fork, and it feels like we must take it, but we have an intermezzo. Bishop f6. So, okay, the biggest threat was definitely the checkmate on g7, so we had to defend from that. And at the same time, we're also developing the piece on the better square on the long diagonal. So rook e1, of course, if knight is taking just briefly, if knight is taking on d8, we take, and the knight cannot really get out. So maybe the knight can try to get out, but it's going to be very difficult. And white is definitely getting into trouble. So rook e1, defending the knight, bringing also the piece to the open file, which looks good. Rook e8, putting more pressure on the knight. f4, queen d6. Okay, we're not in time to win the piece because there is f5 move here, but we're in time to win the pawn because after bishop takes e6, fe, knight d7, pawn cannot take because rook is hanging on e1. And now we're threatening to go with knight to e5 or knight f8, depends how we want to take the pawn, and grab the pawn on e6, after which we're going to gain an extra pawn and we're going to get already winning position for black. Queen h5, starting with the check. I mean, looks like makes sense to weaken some squares, because how do we stop the check? We have to play g6, which would weaken some dark squares. If queen goes to h6, we have bishop f8. Luckily, our bishop can still go back and attack the queen. So here, queen e3, then we have queen f6 move. Rook e1, and then we get again bishop c5, targeting the knight on d4. And after c3, we just have short castle, and we're having completely winning position, being pawn up. At some moment, maybe we can even push e5. We can try to prepare it, but we have to be careful because e6 is also kind of hanging. So queen e5, targeting the rook. We have to do something about it, and we play bishop e6, just defending and attacking at the same time. All right, and queen e2 in this position. So the idea of queen e2 is to put more pressure on the e6 square, bring the rook to e1, and win that pawn. So here we go with c5, immediately attacking the knight, and we of course are ready to react on knight takes e6, because we have to give up a pawn eventually. Knight d6, and here we attack with a queen. Queen d6. There are not so many good squares for the knight. So rook e1, defending the knight. Now we go with knight c6. And the thing is, if knight is moving away, so like on f4, we can just castle. But if knight c3 is being played, we take the knight, queen takes, we trade the queens, we're getting into a rook e6. And after king d7, we're, first of all, we're placing it with a tempo because pawn on d5 was hanging. We have all pieces in the game, king on d7, bishop on e7, knight on c6. We are ready to attack upon on c4 with moves like knight d4, knight b4. We are ready to place the bishop on the long diagonal, h8, a1. And we are ready to bring our rooks into the play, to the e file and to the b files. That was e6, c3. It's very interesting move. So the idea of the c3 is like in the gambit style, a continuation of the gambit. White wants that black is taking, and in that way, white would try to develop with more tempos. So in this case, we can actually take. The big problem is that not that we want to accept the pawn that much, but we try to stop the idea of white, which is of course taking with the pawn on d4. And if that move is achieved, then of course white is having great position. So that's why we have to take on c3 after queen d5, taking the other pawn on d5. Then we have an intermezzo of c takes b2, bishop takes, and castle. And now we're actually still up a pawn. We are ready to jump with the knight to c5 or b6 and develop with the bishop. Bishop c6, pawn takes, queen takes. White is regaining back the pawn. We have rook b8 attacking the bishop. Again, in the next move, we're ready to place the bishop on the long diagonal. Jump with the knight to c5. Bishop can also go to a6 as well. Well, our pieces are just being very active, and e5 could be also under attack. So knight c3. In case of knight c3, we're just going with a6. The thing is, we could go also with the knight b6, but so we could go knight b6 in this position as well, but a6 is just a great positional move, which was also played by Petr Leko, one of the best theoretical players in the world. So bishop d3 going back would not make sense, because then we are just capturing a pawn on e5. In case bishop goes back to a4, staying on this diagonal, we have knight b6 again. And the point is, if we compare it to knight b6 here, there could be an idea of a4, a5, while after a6, bishop a4, knight b6, then there is no this idea of a4, a5, at least immediately. It's not there. So, so bishop a4. And bishop b6 is another move. Sorry, bishop takes c6 is another move. Of course, spoiling the structure. In case of e6 in this position, we take, and after knight d4, we have again the same idea. Knight comes back to b8, defending c6. Bishop is defending e6. Great position, extra pawn. If knight jumps to d4, then we go knight b8 again, defending the pawn on c6, preparing at some moment to push for c5. Let's not forget about that. f4. Yeah, that's a white's idea. Having the pawn on e5 is creating opportunity to have the f5, f6 threat trying to attack on the king side. So here we have to do something instantly, and we go for, so for example, if we go for castle after f5, bishop c5, okay, we can play this, but f5 is already allowed. So we have to play actively. We go c5, attacking the knight, knight b3, and here we have very important move, because if we just try, if we play something like c6, there could be an f5 immediately, and we see that it can get very dangerous and very sharp super quickly. In case of d4, there is queen f3. We would allow this opportunity for white to attack our rook on a8. And after c6, knight e4. So with the move of d4, we weaken the e4 square, and now knight is standing there very nicely. And again, f5, f6 is a threat, so that's also not so good. That's why we have to go with c4. So first of all, we're attacking the knight. It's a tempo. Also, we're kind of forcing knight to go back, or we're trying to have very, very interesting endgame. So in case knight goes back to d4, we have c5, knight c2, and d4, and we have a bunch of very strong pawns in the center. We should be super happy in this position. In case knight goes back to d2, we have knight c6, just developing, targeting the pawn on e5. So the f5 move would not be really possible any longer. And we have just great position with up the pawn. So what happens if queen takes d5? Because it's actually hanging, we're getting into very interesting endgame. Queen takes d5, knight d5, attacking c7, creating a threat of winning the rook with the check. But we take the knight takes c7, we come with the king, knight takes a8, bishop c5, blocking all the squares and checking at the same time. So it's an intermezzo move, very nice one. King h1, bishop b7, attacking the knight, rook d1 check, king c8. Basically, till this moment, we were following the game Bertz and Leko. And in this position, king c6 was played. We believe that king c8 is a more precise move. First of all, it's not stepping on the way of the bishop from b7, and also it looks more natural and coming closer to the knight. But Petr Leko anyway won that game, so king c6 is also good. So king c8, bishop d2, now bishop a7, going back not to allow any kind of business with rook c1. So rook c1 check anyway, knight c6 now, ab, and bishop a8. We win back the piece. No, not that we win back the piece, but we took the piece. We have two pieces for the rook, knight and the bishop. And white is also having two pawns, rook and two pawns. But the problem is that these two pawns are doubled. So it means like this extra pawn is like not really an extra pawn or half a pawn. And we can say that the only extra pawn is the e5 pawn, which of course undoubtedly is not, I want to say is weak, but it's not actually weak. It's a pretty strong one. Potentially can be marshed and helped with a pawn on f4. So generally this endgame is pretty, it's a complex one, definitely. But if someone can have chances, is definitely black due to the bishops and due to all the pieces activity. Of course, first thing what black should do, just to develop the rook in the next move, bring king to b8, removing the king from the pin, and definitely due to the pawn structure and due to the material advantage, there is an advantage for black. But we should be careful with these pawns, with the f and e pawn, because if we're not careful, then they're going to create a passer. So there is at least draw opportunities for black, but I would say that black can still play on and try to win this endgame. So that was all about the c3 move. Now let's look at rook e1, which looks very logical. It's a very common move. So what is this move doing? It's preparing the move knight takes on d4, because white is thinking that after knight d4, there is knight takes e5. So we castle, bishop c6, bc, and knight d4. So now the idea of f4, f5 is again in the picture. White is also attacking the pawn on c6. So here our typical move comes to mind. It's knight b8, coming back with a knight, controlling the f5 square, at the same time ready to go forward with a c5 and knight c6 ideas, targeting also the pawn on e5. So in case of f4, which would be very logical, we go with our main idea, c5, knight f3, knight c6. So now we managed to block the idea of f5. And after knight c3, d4, we go all the way forward, knight e4, and now queen d5. Now, normally when we want to play d4, we want to follow it up with queen d5. So that's how it's supposed to work. So queen d5. And basically we have a great position. We can get more space by playing a5, a4 on the queen side. The most important that we fix the pawns. They cannot really move forward. But we have to watch out and be careful about the king side play of white. Our bishop on c8 is going to stay here for some time, most likely, because it's not clear yet where to put it. We can improve our rooks to the d file and the b file, targeting the b2 square at some moment. So yeah, we're definitely having a much better position here. Objectively speaking, it's a slightly better position, but it's much more comfortable to play as black. So queen h5, which is most likely going to transpose the queen f3 line. So after c5, if knight goes to f5, bishop takes, queen takes, and now we're going to transpose to the queen f3 line, which we're going to look just in a bit. And in case knight goes back to f3, then it's just not a good square for the knight there. Because after knight c6, there are already ideas to bring the queen to f5 and g4. And also this knight is standing away from the general plan of the f4, f5 ideas. So here after knight g5, bishop f5, and we don't have any issues on h7. So knight c3, basically not addressing a threat of c5 at all. We're going for it. If knight goes to f3, again, blocking the ideas of f4, f5. We go bishop e6, bishop e4, and knight c6. We developed fine. The pawn on e5 is a target. We're going to play rook b8, targeting b2 square. We have strong pawns, c5, d5. Our bishops are very nice, so we have a bishop pair. And since there is nothing going on with f4, f5, white doesn't really have any plan, and we are for sure slightly better. So knight d goes back to e2, more passive square. Now we are ready to go with d4. So generally we play d4 when the knight is on e2. That's when we play it. So knight is already restricted. And the other idea, or it could be also a contribution to this rule, is that when we can follow it up with queen d5. So basically d4, knight d4. Okay, in this position, not exactly queen d5, but queen d5 could have been played. Knight c6, we're putting pressure on e5, so it works for concrete reasons. Bishop f4, and now bishop g4. We're stopping the idea of knight jumping to g3 and queen coming to f3. So now a3, bishop goes back, and we're having great positions. If white is playing g4, they're going to weaken themselves. Meanwhile, we can also go for this queen d5 move, bringing the rooks to some files like rook e8, rook b8, putting pressure on the e5 pawn, and, well, we're definitely in the driver's seat in this position. In case knight goes back to b3, again targeting the pawn on d5, we have to do something. So if we try to push forward the pawn with a d4, then again, as we discussed earlier, we push on d4. If we can follow it up with queen d5, or when the knight is standing on e2. And it's neither of the cases, because after d4 push, there's going to be a strong counterplay by white with move queen f3, immediately attacking our rook on a8. So we have to stop the attack. So we play c6. After knight d4, we play queen d5. But after queen g3, already there are some problems on the king side, and some counterattack is started by white. So d4 we don't go, but we play bishop e6. So we keep solid position, we defend the pawn on d5. Potentially we can go with a d4 move definitely in the future, but for now we just try to be solid. f4, immediately introducing idea of pushing f5. After bishop takes, taking on d5, so we have to react on that. We play c6, defending the pawn, trying to be very solid. Knight a4, and now knight d7. So now white kind of has the strange knights on the queen side, which are, located super strange on a4 and b3. We have a bishop pair, and we can also bring our queen via the 5th or 4th rank, via the b file, queen b8, queen b5, queen b4, and that's how our queen can be activated. Other than that, we should just keep an eye also on this pawns on f5 and on f4 and e5, and potentially we could push the pawns, but they're perfectly well standing right now in the center. That was knight c3 move, and now we come to the queen f3 we were discussing. So basically the whole idea of queen f3 is that white is preparing knight f5 against the c5 move. So we go for c5, that's our main idea. We have to finish the development, we need it desperately. So knight f5, we take it, queen takes, now we transpose to the variation with queen h5. So queen d7, we are offering a trade to the queens. If white is taking, which is possible. Okay, first let's look if white is not taking. So queen h5, moving away. We play queen e6, f4, and now g6. We stopped the pawn march to f5. And now, after knight c6, we're going to roll with our pawns. We will see, probably we'll start maybe with c4 to have this pawn also supporting at some moment the pawn chain. But for now, knight c6, we have to bring our last piece on the game. Meanwhile, it's not so clear what are the best squares for these pieces for white. In case queen goes back to f3, then we go again with knight c6, c3, rook a8, bringing the queen. We are ready to break this pawn on e6, opening the f file, opening the e file. Bishop could go back, and well, white is getting into the trouble in this position. It's clearly better position for black. If queen decides to trade, queen takes on d8, knight takes, knight c3, c6. Basically, we have without problem an endgame where we can again try to grab more space on the queen side by playing moves like a5, a4. We can also break the center with f6, bringing the rook to e8. Potentially, also we can put the pawn on c4, and then our pieces could it could help our pieces to remaneuver. Let's say knight could go to c5, potentially to e4 or anywhere else, or it could also we could also create more pressure on the b file. So that was rook e1, and now we go to the main move, which is bishop takes c6. This is like the most correct play, or like the best way for white to try something. So bishop takes c6, pawn takes. So now if e6 again being played, we take, and knight after knight d4, again we have knight b8. Now we're transposing again to the position which we discussed a couple of moves ago. So queen d4. Basically, what white is saying, white is not sure if knight takes d4 is working. So that's why white is taking with the queen, but it's pretty awkward position because he would love to have knight here. But the only thing what happened is that queen is defending the pawn on e5, and basically black cannot take on e5. So here we castle. We definitely have to stop, finish the development. Knight c3, and now we go knight c5. Our main idea is to place the knight on e7 and push the pawns with c5, and later also with the d4. Let's not forget we have to defend this pawn, so we have to play bishop b7 first to have this pawn all defended. And after we push our pawn, the bishop is going to get very open. Again, we have a bishop pair. We got it after bishop took on c6. So we definitely have some advantage. Long-term talking, we have some weaknesses in our pawn structure, but e5 is an also isolated pawn for time being. So we could also try and attack it a bit later. Position is at least slightly better on for black. So knight takes d4. This is a critical line. Basically, what is happening is that white is sacrificing the pawn on e5, but not for a long time. So here we take on e5, we accept the challenge. The main line is actually knight b8. If you're interested, knight b8 is the main line, but we're going for this. We're taking the pawn on e5. Well, there is not much wrong about this knight b8 move, but just simply this knight e5 move could bring many interesting positions we would like to play, and there are so many ways to attack the knight right now that it's not so easy to do correct move if knight e5 is actually not so common. In case queen is attacking the knight, which objectively dubious move, this was actually never played in the over the board games. It looks pretty awkward, but also we have to understand how to handle this. We play queen d6, both defending the c6 square and knight on e5. So after, let's say, bishop f4 attacking the knight, we're just going to play f6 defending, and after rook e1 castle. And if here white wants to immediately win back the pawn playing bishop f4 takes, then white is going to lose because of the problem on this diagonal. f4 makes sense, targeting the knight. We have to move away with knight g4, and now knight is remaneuvering to the f6 square from which knight came all the way from the beginning. So rook e1, now we play bishop d7. Seemingly this move doesn't do much. Let's say if white is just continuing development playing something like knight c3, then we say, oh, thank you for letting us castle. Because the problem is after queen e7, there is rook a8, and if queen takes the queen, there is going to be a checkmate on e1. So that's why white has to do something, and they go for h3. knight f6, knight c3, and now the problem is that there is no checkmate any longer on e1, so this castle doesn't work. We have to play king f8, but it is no problem. As we already discussed, our rook can enter the game. We are the 6th rank, so we can play h5, h4, rook can come to h6, g6, the other rook can come to e8, so there are no real problems. The position is clearly better for black, and again, we steal up a pawn. So f4, targeting the pawn. Here I would like you to stop the video and try to find the best move for black. So probably you realize that if you move the knight, let's say to g4, we have the problem on c5, c6, sorry. So that's why we have to do an interesting move, which is an intermezzo, a counterattack. We're attacking the knight on d4. So white is attacking the knight on d5, we are attacking the knight on d4. So now, in case knight moves away, we have c6. I mean, knight b5, c6. But if white decides to take our knight, then we take the knight on d4, queen takes, and with c5, queen d3, castle, we again gaining these strong pawns. e5 pawn is isolated. We have a bishop pair advantage. Bishop can come to a6. Also, we can play a5 with a threat. Bishop a6. Bishop can go to e6. e5 could be under attack very easily. And we have strong pawns, d and e pawns. So great position for black. In case rook e1, which could be a very logical move, feels like the most natural one. Bringing the rook, x-raying the king, but it's not really the best move. We have very nice move here, f6. So in practice, c5 was played, queen d6 was played, and knight g6 were played. But our move is much stronger, f6, defending the knight. In case queen h5 check, we have g6, queen h6 trying to stop us from castling. We play, in case we play king f7, which is also possible. So we want fake castle. We want to artificially castle our king, bring king to the safety. After rook e5, pawn takes, knight c6, queen d6. Knight takes the bishop, and after knight d2, the position is getting a bit complicated and white is getting a compensation for material. But after c5 here, we are ready to play with this king f7 as earlier, because now after king g7, queen g7, we have a very nice move, queen d7. And our next move is threatening a checkmate to a queen. It's not really a checkmate to a queen, but we're threatening a trade. Then the queen cannot really escape from this. So let's say knight goes away. We have c4 again, f4. And now I have a question to you. Stop the video and try to find the best move for black. And it's of course queen f8, of course, because we are attacking the knight. They attack our knight. We have time for it. Queen f8, rook f8, fe, cb, e6, king c6, ab, and we're going to get the pawn on e6, so there's not going to be any problem. We are most likely going to be up a pawn in this endgame with two strong bishops. So great, great game, great position for black. Knight c3 would be a bit too slow. We're just developing the piece, not really doing much. So we have bishop d7. We are controlling the c6 square, and now knight can go away from the e5. So if in case of f4, we have knight g6, f5, knight can jump back. Queen h5 looks logical because now g6 is not really a question. So we have to move with the king away with f8. In the next move, we can offer a trade to a queen with a queen e8. We cannot really castle right now, but our knight is super strong on e5. White cannot really attack the king. Again, potentially we could bring the rook to the game. We could also play later king f7, rook can get out. But for now, the position is great. Also, c5 pushes are ready, but we have to prepare it because d5 could be weakness. f4. So probably because of this move, f6 is being avoided for black. But if we know how to play it, we can go for it. So basically, if we move the knight, then the c6 is hanging. Knight c6 is a move. So that's why we have to play bishop g4. We are attacking the queen, and we're not handling the problem of the knight. Knight takes c6 doesn't really work because after queen d7, knight takes, pawn takes, queen d2, we have short castle. And the problem is that the position of the white king is pretty weak, even though it doesn't feel so. But with our strong bishops, it's going to be very easy. It's going to be very easy to attack the king. So queen d2, removing the queen. So here it feels like we could do a double attack. Sorry, not double attack, but counter attack with c5. But the problem is after fe takes, the position is getting complex. We got all these pawn islands. Every pawn is pawn island. We have a bishop pair, that's true, but our king is still in the center and the pawn structure is awful. So we have to castle here. We don't care about anything. We don't care about our knight. And it feels like not dangerous position for the king. That's why I was like highlighting it. It feels like this position is not dangerous for white's king at all, but seemingly it is. So let's start with h3. What happens if white is attacking our bishop? Then we just move it away. Pawn takes, pawn takes. If knight f3 attacking the pawn, then we have rook f3. Very nice sacrifice. Pawn takes. Bishop c5 check, king h2 and queen h4. We attack both h3 and the rook on e1. So in that case, white actually cannot defend properly. In case rook takes on e5, we have bishop d6. We have beautiful pieces looking at the king side. So rook e1, coming back. Then we have just queen h4. Too many ideas, too many threats in the position. So just so easy, so difficult to stop from white. Rook e3. We go with the queen f6, already introducing a checkmate idea. Knight f3. Now bishop h3 is there. And after bishop c5, there are too many pins. Threat of taking on knight on f3, bringing the rook to e8. White is going to collapse in the next moves. So in case pawn takes on e5 without inclusion of h3, we take. And rook takes e5. So we just can see, let's play bishop d6 first. Rook e1 and queen h4. We just see the difference of the pieces. There are 4 pieces which are attacking the white's king, and there are 3 pieces standing and doing nothing on the queen side, on the queen side. And also, actually, we can say this knight is also doing not doing really much, because okay, it can come back on one square, but generally it's not really defending. So only 2 pieces which are defending are the queen and the rook. But it's actually very difficult when so many strong pieces are attacking, so the position is objectively lost already. So that was the rook e5. So what happens after knight c6? Then we go bishop c5. Very important intermediate move, because we are giving a check, king h1, and now queen h4, bringing the queen there. Now we have many ideas, such as bringing the rook to f2 or bringing the bishop to f2, g3, or we can play e4 and bring our bishop via d6, attacking the h2. But for now, bishop is cutting the king out from g1. There are some ideas. Also bringing the rook to h6 square or to the h5 square and checkmating on h2. It's very difficult to stop the checkmate. That was rook e1. Now we go to the main move, which is actually the most correct way to play now for white. This is a strong move. Bishop f4, attacking the knight. So white should attack the knight, but there is a correct way, and it's only this move. Which, of course, since this line is not so, like, this knight d7 is generally not the most common move, and chances that white will know it, it's also not so high, but definitely we have to be ready for the best approach from white, sorry. So if we're going to remove the knight, playing knight g6, the problem is that our knight c6, white is taking, attacking our queen, queen d7, knight e7, knight e7, and now queen d4. it is just too much, because the problem is we weakened so many dark squares. We didn't finish the development yet. Our king is in a bit trouble for now. And again, these dark squares are pretty weak. So it's already better for white. So we have to play c5 here. This is a move on which this line is holding. If we didn't have this move, then this was not really possible to play. c5. If knight b5, make some pressure on the c7 square, but it doesn't really bring any problems because we play c6. We attack the knight again. So if bishop e5, cb, bishop g7, rook g8, bishop e5, we have rook g6. We have ideas of bringing the bishop to b7, queen to d7, long castle. We could also have ideas to play king f8 and king g8 if we want to keep the king on the king side. But of course, if we have a chance to castle long, why not to do so? So bishop takes e5 after c5 is the main move. So here we take the knight, obviously. Queen d4, in case of this move, we have c5, super strong. And now we're in time to castle with a king. So it's not really a good move. I mean, the castle is not a good move, but queen d4. So bishop takes g7 must be played, the only move. So now we play rook g8, attacking the bishop, also targeting this g2 pawn and x-raying the king. If bishop goes back and takes d4, this is actually a bad move because after bishop h3, rook h2, rook g2 is a huge move, already huge idea. And if g3 is played, then we are just winning an exchange. First, we can play c5, bishop e5, and then take, and queen d7. We can we could castle long, but the problem is now our position maybe is a bit too open. But another idea which we could go for is playing rook g6 and then king f8 and king g8. Bringing the king to g8 would be very safe, actually positioned for the king. If queen takes on d4 immediately, now also white is going to lose an exchange, but a bit better position, because after f6, bishop h6, bishop h3 is again an issue. After g3, bishop takes, king takes, and queen d7. Now we're going to place the king on f7. Again, we're up an exchange in this position. We're up an exchange for a pawn. So there is not much. And also, again, the pieces of white are not out, and our pieces are ready to create some attacks. Also, there is a check. You have to watch out, bishop c5, and so on and so forth. Bishop e5 is the good move for white. Basically, the idea is that after bishop h3, creating a threat on g2, white is going to play bishop g3, blocking this file, the x-ray against the king. So we play c5. We control the d4 pawn. We defend the d4 pawn. We will not give it up so easily. c3, interesting idea of targeting our strong center. So white is starting immediately attacking it. We're taking on c3, knight c3, and now d4. Again, attacking the knight. Going forward with a pawn, we're not giving up a pawn. And after knight d4, we have queen d5, a double attack. So it doesn't really work so well. In case queen goes to h5, this is pretty tempting move because it's targeting the pawn on h7. It's also creating some x-ray. There are some issues on the king side. But after rook g5, queen takes h7, we have bishop f5 move, attacking the queen. If queen goes to h6, we have rook g6, queen h5, and queen d7, and after which we have a long castle. Queen h8 check, then we have king d7, very nice move. Trade of the queen is happening. The problem is that c2 pawn is hanging. Also, there is an x-ray on the bishop. Also, there is a problem on g2. So after knight a3, bishop takes on d4, bishop e4, attacking the pawn on g2, f3, cd, fe, de. We have a super strong pawns, even though it looks like, materially speaking, we're not up a pawn as earlier, But we have super strong position with the two connected passers in the center, which we're going to win. So rook e1. Rook e1 will bring another piece into the game, also extraying the king here, which looks very tempting. Queen b6, the idea of queen that we have opportunity to bring the queen all the way to the g6 square, also attacking the pawn on b2. After b4, which would try to break the pawn chain, this move was played in the game Papagen Stitch. Here the main idea is that we cannot really take with a queen, because otherwise there will be this bishop, very nice move, attacking the bishop on e7. So queen takes b4, knight b2, and after bishop g4, queen c1, we have king f8, just hiding with the king. The position is pretty complex here, for sure. It's not easy, but we have ideas of hiding the king to g8 after playing rook g6. We have, of course, the rook also standing. Rook can also come to the game. It can, at any file it can go. And also we have a pressure against the king on the king side. Meanwhile, it's not really... No, it's actually an extra pawn. So we still have an extra pawn. So let's not argue about that. At least b4, immediately challenging the pawn is the best move for white. Immediately attacking the pawn on c5. c5 cannot really take, because then d4 is going to fall. We have to play something though. So here we go, king f8. The idea is that we want to hide with the king all the way to g8. We don't need to long castle, we hide with the king to g8, because we cannot really react on this b4 pawn. So if queen h5 now, then it's already a different option. It's a bit better due to our king location f8. Now we have to play rook g6, because if we go rook g5 after queen h7, bishop f5, then there's going to be check and we're going to lose material. So here rook g6 must be played with the idea of king g8 defending the pawn. So white has to take, if they want to claim something, white has to take on h7. But after bishop f6, in case of rook e1, we can just straight play queen f6, rook e1, bishop g4. And the location of the queen on h7 is questionable. In case of bishop f6, queen f6, and again, location of the queen is very strange. And in case of f4 in this position, we have bishop f5 with the threat of rook takes g2. So now after queen h5, we have bishop g4. If queen h7, bishop f5, we can just repeat, we can just go for a draw. But also, if we don't want to draw, we can play this move bishop e4, or we can play bishop e5 with some crazy positions if we don't want to draw. But in case in this position white is deviating, playing bishop f6, and we take on f6, queen takes on d5, and after rook e8, we have very dangerous compensation. Practically speaking, it could finish in a draw. But the problem is, for that, white has to find the only moves. So let's see the line which could continue. Knight d2, rook e2, f5, the only move. Rook g5, h4, the only move. Rook h5, knight e4, queen takes h4. And now, basically, after finding 3 moves in a row from this position, white could give a perpetual check. So queen d6, king d7, queen e5, queen f8. So, but for that, white had to find very precise move. So that's why it's not so easy at all. But queen h5 is definitely a tempting idea. So what happens if white takes on c5, trying to, first of all, take back the pawn and also weaken our pawns? So now we go bishop c5, also defending on d4. At the same time, we are ready to jump with a bishop, with a queen to g5 to h4, attacking the king. So bishop takes on d4, bishop takes queen d4. We have bishop h3, another idea of trying to win an exchange. But unfortunately here, it's not really working, since after queen b4, we have to play queen e7, king e7, and after rook e1, we move the king away, and white is in time to play g3, and rook is already not on f1 due to this intermezzo check. But now after rook gc8, we are attacking the pawn on c2, knight a3, and after rook c5, the knight actually doesn't really have so many squares from a3. So we can compare two pieces, which is beautiful bishop and not such a beautiful knight on a3. So for that, of course, black surely has a compensation for the pawn. But the one who can play for a win is definitely black, because the material advantage doesn't really mean here much, but rather the piece activity, and knight which cannot do really much. And even if we want the pawn so badly, we can always try to win it on c2. So knight d2, trying to develop at the same time creating threats of jumping with a knight on f3 or b3, targeting the pawn on d4, bishop on c5. So here we go for queen g5. Our idea is, of course, attacking the bishop and the pawn on g2 at the same time. So bishop g3 the only move to stop that. And again, knight can jump to b3 or f3. So now we go with the bishop to g4. It's very important, this intermezzo, not to allow the knight coming on f3 just like this. Because after knight f3, we have queen f6, and now we're threatening to take and spoil the structure. In case of queen c1, we have bishop of b4. Basically, we are forcing the trade of the queen since knight has to move away. Knight b3, queen takes, rook takes, and bishop c3. We're defending the pawn on d3, attacking the rook. We are having absolutely fine position. If we're looking at the amount of pawns, it looks like it's equal, materially equal position. But, of course, we have double pawns. Let's not forget about that. But on the other hand, we have a bishop pair and more active pieces. And position looks, of course, the position looks very complicated, but we surely have counterattack. So in case of f3 here, attacking the bishop, we have to move it back, bishop f5. Now there is no knight f3 any longer because pawn is there. So knight b3 is a move. Bishop goes back, no other choice. King moves away from this diagonal. But here, after queen f6, we introduce ideas in the position such as taking on g3 potential at some moment, checking and playing d3, or putting pressure on the c2 pawn. Actually also taking on c2, taking here, and then checking and playing d3. But okay, maybe it's a bit too complicated. But definitely ideas of taking on g3, playing taking with the rook on g3, playing d3, and checkmating on the h file are in the picture. Also, if not for that, then of course black could build more pressure on the c2 pawn with the rook and the bishop and the queen with all the pieces. Obviously, ideas of pushing the pawn on the a file are also there. So yeah, many ideas for black in this position. And again, materially speaking, it's equal position. But due to activity of the pieces, I would say that black has some very good chances here. That was all about this chapter. So let us start and check some key moments. Just do a quick summary of this chapter. Let's start with this position. So first of all, this position happened, last move was rook e1 check. So we're discussing that even though our king would remain in the center, it's going to be much safer than the white's king. So if we put some piece on the way, then it would not be so good, because bishop on e6 is losing to f5, or else a queen g5, g4. If we go back with the bishop, it's also not good because knight c6. So we have to play king f8. And the thing here is we shouldn't be worried that we're not castling. No, because the thing is after h5, rook h6, we can bring the rook out a few moves later. Our rook can get out, we are h6, we are the 6th rank. And other than that, we have very active pieces. And actually, even though it feels like black's king is the one who is in trouble, but black's king is kind of fine. It's white's king which is in trouble. Next position is when we get this e6 break, pawn takes, bishop takes on c6, and knight d4. Then here, a very important move is knight b8. At the same time, defending the pawn on c6 and on e6. Queen h5, we are not really worried about all this jumps. And at some moment, we are ready to follow with c5 or e5 moves in this position. The next position is again pretty similar because now f4, f5 is a big threat. At the same time, pawn on c6 is hanging. So we're just playing knight b8, defending on c5, c6, introducing idea of c5, bringing knight to c6. At the same time, controlling the f5 square so that f4, f5 is not possible. The next position is where we attacked the knight with a c5, knight move to b3. And now in this position, the problem is that we have to know when we can play d4. We can play d4 if the knight is on e2, generally, or when we can follow it up with queen d5. But since we have very weak diagonal after d5, after playing d5, then if we would play d5, there would be queen f3 immediately coming with a tempo on our rook. So we would force to play c6, and then after a couple of moves, it's suddenly white who is attacking. So that's why in this position, it's very important that we play bishop e6. Solid move, defending the pawn on d5, highlighting the bad position of the knights. And later we can play d4, but not yet, not now. So the next position is this one. Here queen d2 was played the last move. We played bishop g4, queen d2, and our knight on e5 is hanging. It's important to remember, if we move the knight, then we will have problem. Knight c6 is going to happen. So here we don't care about the knight, we just castle. We just castle in this position because c5 is possible, but it would bring some chaos in the position. We don't need chaos. So we castle in this position. We give up a piece because after a couple of moves, it's going to be visible that we are creating just a huge attack while all the pieces on the queen side are standing and waiting for white. So sacrificing material is always typical in this kind of structures. b4 is another move, but rather this idea coming not necessarily against this b4 move, but generally when we have such position, we have an idea of bringing the rook to g6 and king to g8. And we start with king f8, then place the rook to g6 and king comes to g8. That's important to remember this idea. And I think this is the most important ideas. These are all the most important ideas from this chapter, or the most important patterns. I hoped you learned a lot today about the Scotch Gambit e5 move, and I'm going to see you in the next chapter.